So I'm here today with Rick Vines of Vines Plumbing and Restoration, as you can see. And I wanted to speak to Rick about a social media post that I shared last night. I don't even know how I found it, but I shared it. Something that kind of touched me in maybe not the most favorable way. Um, and I'll share that social media post within this video. But Rick made a very educational comment in response to that post. So I reached out to him personally and asked if he would be willing to allow me to come in and just talk about what Vines does and what they don't do, because a lot of people just don't know. And the thing that concerns me is I can tell you now with absolute certainty I wouldn't know what to do if I had a fire or any kind of tragic loss, a flood or hurricane or whatever. First, I would call my insurance agent, and beyond that, I'm clueless. So Rick was courteous enough to allow me to come out to his office and talk to us about what it is that Vines does and what it is that Vines does not do.
Well, we appreciate that, Jason. It means a lot. It's opened up a lot of great conversation with a lot of your followers and a lot of our customers. I've got to see great open dialogue with all of this, and I think it is important to address. This is something that does surround the industry. Here at Vines, I'll express what we do differently, not in a manner that shades light on anybody else. So please understand, my goal is just to educate, our customers and folks out there that may be curious in how this process works. So I'll say that first and foremost. It's very important to me. We're in three separate businesses here at Vines, three separate, really the plumbing and HVAC kind of go together, and then restoration's kind of aside from the service industry, but we want to consolidate all of those and give our very best in everything that we do. You and I spoke earlier, and I think it's important to notate, kind of where we started to really understand who we are. When we started the restoration division, water was all we did. And the reason for that is because I align completely with you, and I align with all of you. I recognized early on, listen, being an owner of a service business, I can't afford to make a lot of people upset. Being a local here in this community, it just wasn't something I was interested in undergoing. So my wife and I, we did restoration water only for several years, and I recognized that there was a lot of clients that needed me in this other part of the business. Well, I still accepted the fact that we wouldn't chase fire. I didn't think it was appealing. Not at someone's lowest moment that they go through, and more tragically, if they've lost a loved one, if a child was injured. I also consider the fact that this is not something I would ever want to send an employee down a road as an expectation for them to provide a living for them and their family. So we ran across an organization called 1-800-BOARD-UP. Now, I don't own 1-800-BOARD-UP. They're a national franchise, and every office is a bit independent. 1-800-BOARD-UP here in Myrtle Beach, we operate our division almost like a nonprofit. There's nothing that's billed through 1-800-BOARD-UP. Everything that we offer through clothing, all a free service. Hotel, we pay that out of pocket, so nobody gives that to us for free. We pay for that and place people and victims up in a hotel. We provide, what we consider bare essentials and necessities: toothbrushes, possibly a mobile phone if they need it. We coordinate with the fire department to try to recover medications and keys, and all of that time spent is what we consider savings from not having a sales guy on site to be able to give back to our community. We talked earlier about trust, and this is not a moment you do that while trying to sell somebody. This is a moment you earn that from people. And so, we have a moment to be able to spend with someone at their lowest point, and that's there's some data on that with the devastation in people's lives and some of those events and what that looks like, and this is categorized in one of those. Losing loved ones and losing a spouse, all those things are difficult, and this falls under that category, under that same level of loss that someone experiences. So we understand it's a lot, and so we take this opportunity to serve them at our highest capacity. But we also we educate, because again, we educate them on what's out there and what not to do, because I don't want anyone making a commitment to my company, to anyone else's company. In fact, we're not there to discuss restoration at all. Because naturally, when you give a free service and you show your heart in what you do, people are going to ask questions, Jason. They're going to ask who who's paying for this? How, and I want them to know. And the reason we don't show up in a Vines truck is because people will naturally assume that you're a fire chaser. So 1-800-BOARD-UP, going back to its conception in our organization, it only, the national brand only allows us to hire firemen and local firemen at that. And I love that because, again, we're giving back to our local community. And it was designed by a group of fire people that said, when these guys retire, they need something to do. Well, firemen can't stand restoration companies. Just like as a service guy, I couldn't stand that approach as well. So, my guys don't align with chasing fire, being a sales guy. I'll tell you this, when they interview with me, the number one thing they tell me is, Rick, when I go to a fire now versus when I was on a fire truck, what I always struggled with is putting that fire out and looking at that curb and seeing a family sitting on that curb and not knowing what happened next. And now I get to fulfill that. I get to fulfill making sure that that process is seen through, that those people at least have a place to put their head down tonight and be able to gather their thoughts to make an educated decision on moving forward with who puts their home together. Now, again, I'll mention, 1-800-BOARD-UP is all over the place. Some people run it differently. I was the fastest growing office when I was newly onboarded. So the first year in business, we were the fastest growing office. And this isn't like a typical franchise that we would pay out a commission or a franchise fee to. We pay for the territory and the structure. And it's well put together, and it's very focused on serving the fire community. So aside from the victim, our fire service and first responders, it's a huge community here, and we care deeply about them. So not only are we giving them a place of an opportunity for employment, but we're also being able to serve them alongside of these tragic moments in people's lives. So great opportunity for us there. So, the only thing that ever even gets billed is if my company has to come in and shore or board up or put fencing around, and we identify that there's insurance, right? And so that's something that the fire service and police departments, we get called by multiple municipalities, and not all of them call us directly, but we have a strong presence in some of our local municipalities that rely on the service. Police departments, fire departments, all in the same for us. And so there's times they call us in, they say, Rick, this is a vacant building. We have no money to pay. Can you do it? Absolutely, we'll be there, because your opportunity to show who you are is within those moments where there is no insurance. On a lower income side of town, or maybe for us in restoration, there's no opportunity in mobile home fires. It's a complete loss. Right. And it's interesting because I don't have my competition showing up in those neighborhoods, right? And if we know about it, we're going to respond, and we're going to show up, and we're going to do what needs to be done for the community. The other side of this is it does take restoration projects to fund that, right? The money comes from that. But the non-negotiable for us is that's a piece that's not discussed unless someone's willing to have that conversation. It's not a healthy conversation to have by me bringing up and trying to sell you a service. Meanwhile, I'm trying to pat you on the back and make sure that you're taken care of that night. That's not the goal. So our approach is much different than what people assumed. And I'm sorry for the confusion. And we did put a little sticker on the trucks now that say "Powered by Vines," so there is no confusion. The last thing I want to do is try to portray where someone we're not. It is, this is Vines. This is Vines as people. It's just an entirely different approach than what most people are used to, and it's not something I advertise. I've learned through faith. I've learned through my involvement in church leadership. You don't want to shout this on the rooftops, and I know that this moment may seem that way, but this is to confront some confusion that we've dealt with together, and we want to make sure that people have a very clear understanding to what we do and how we do it.
Absolutely. Well, Rick, I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to meet with you and to offer this clarification. I read the comment last night, and we had a little discussion when I first came in. So I'm comfortable with the explanation with how you do things differently than others. It's kind of a comforting fact, because I've got to say there's nothing more disgusting than what I'm going to call an ambulance chaser, be it an attorney, something like this, because the last thing you want to, in my opinion, the last thing somebody needs to do is approach somebody from any kind of sales tactic at their most vulnerable. And it happens all the time,
And you're allowed to say things I'm not, right? So I appreciate the position, and I really appreciate the position of the community, because I for years have wondered how this has gone on for so many years. And again, I don't want to downplay. Everybody's got to provide a living for their family, their business, the way that they see fit. And my goal, again, and I'll state this up front, is not to shed negative light on any competition or, hey, look at me, we do it better, right? That's not it at all. People have to make an educated decision on what they know. And unfortunately, this is not a popular conversation. Clearly, there was a lot of hype around your comment, and a lot of people spoke really highly about our organizations and gave other opinions about other experiences. And my goal in all of this is just to make sure that they don't align Vines and 1-800 Board Up with that, because it's completely two different things. We give back more than what we receive through that service, and it's important to us. And what people may ask, Rick, why in the world would you do that? Why other companies wouldn't want to do that? I've invited other companies to join me in this, because it's expensive, right? But what I've recognized is it's not expensive when you weigh up the reputation your company builds in a time like that. We had a conversation. I mentioned this to you earlier. I had a gentleman call me last week about a business that he was starting, and it was a great question. He asked. He said, Rick, when you and your wife started your company, how did you think of the concept of either bringing faith into your organization or having a ministry mindset in ways that you go out and contribute to your community in the ways that you do? And it was interesting because the conversation was very short, and it was the response was very simple. It was time out. I think you're going about this in the wrong direction. What you need to consider when you fulfill a need is if it's faith that calls you to do something, your relationship with the Lord, or if it's simply that you see someone in need and you want to be a good person. Anything you align with. When there is a need that needs to be met, you just meet it, right? So it's difficult to sit here and formulate an idea and call it as something the Lord put on my heart, which I don't, again, discredit someone trying to do these things to promote their business or to show their heart in what they do. But I like to see it as, hey, there's a need, just like the flood in 2019. We were a part of and coordinated every bit of that. 3,000 people a day for several weeks that we contributed before doing an ounce of work for this community. So going out and showing, and again, this isn't a hey, look at me moment. But when the Lord or whatever you relate to put something in front of you, you just meet the need. The doors will continue to be open for you. And we talked about that earlier, something that resonated with you as well. And I think that's very important to understand that this wasn't, how do we put a cross on the truck and relate to Christianity? No. Our conversations are much like this. How do we show our technicians and show a level of difference that people see something great in us? See that, it's more about not just our reputation. It's not about Rick Vines or Stacy Vines personally, but how do we represent something greater than ourselves without having to give a visual? And that is putting plan to action and being the hands and feet in ways and being intentional with how you do it. And you don't do that for the reason of gaining business. Again, we have a higher obligation in this life, and people can see through bullcrap. And so, those opportunities with going out, responding to the mobile home victims, responding to the non-insured victims, super important to us. And we take that as serious as going into a neighborhood like we went into the other night. Everyone deserves to be served at that capacity, regardless of their financial position in this life. And so we want to be consistent with all that, Jason.
They're all humans. At the end of the day, they're all humans. Well, Rick, I appreciate the opportunity, like I said.